Hey guys, really quickly before this episode starts, I just wanted to say that this podcast is produced by the I.A.M Podcast team, which is my company. And if you're looking for a podcast yourself, or your business is looking for a podcast that is along the same lines as this, we're on video or on audio, please feel free to contact us on the link below, and we look forward to talking soon. Cheers.
A few years ago, I nearly lost my mum to an operation that went horribly wrong. She's very short space of time. I had to kind of learn how to separate fact and emotion. Like, focus was getting my sister through. My name's Taylor James. I host the Waffle Shop podcast, which was, well, it is a kind of a hybrid between a music and mental health podcast that was born out of quite a traumatic experience for me. A few years ago, I nearly lost my mum to an operation that went horribly wrong. She's now in a neurological care home requiring 24-hour care. And in the process of when everything was happening, I hit rock bottom. Didn't have a clue about mental health at the time. And yeah, through various kind of forms of therapy and talking to my younger sister, it kind of got to the stage where I was like, okay, I can't carry this all on my own. So I started talking about it. And still, I'd say this quite a lot recently, especially, like, I still to this day do not know why I sat down and decided to record that first episode. But yeah, 4 years later, it's probably the best decision I've ever made. So yeah,
you're absolutely killing it. Number one in Austria, as we were talking about before.
It's mental. I have no idea what it means, but it's just because it does better in like countries that don't speak English, or it's not like their first language. So it's surreal.
It must resonate with a lot of people. That's what we found is people trying to find decent mental health podcasts. There's a lot of people out there who are struggling. People like yourself, people like me, Joe, Sheeran behind the camera. You know, we've all gone through our fair share of things. From coming back to you speaking about your mum, what was that like? Because that's still quite recent, only a couple of years ago. How was that the first 6 months of sort of coping with that?
To be honest, it was a complete and utter blur. In a very short space of time, I had to kind of learn how to separate fact and emotion. Obviously, I was having very difficult conversations with top surgeons and physiotherapists and talking about things like brain damage and all these things that no one should ever really hear about, regardless of what the relation might be. So yeah, I had to grow up very quickly, as well as then almost become a parent to my younger sister at the time, take on the family home. So there was a bit of a lethal cocktail. But the first 6 months, in all honesty, mate, was a complete and utter blur. I do not know how I got through it, but I think it was just that kind of resilience, that, to be fair, that I've learned from my mum, that regardless of what's thrown at you, you just kind of keep going. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one to answer, because if you ask me what happened in that space of time, other than pretty much every day was spent at a hospital in some form of capacity or rehab centre, I don't know.
Like autopilot.
Complete and utter autopilot. Which is good in one way, because I just kind of almost switched off the noise and just kind of got on with it. And like I said about the switching off the emotion to like deal with the facts, I think it kind of gave me this real powerful tool of ignoring the noise and just focusing on what I needed to focus on. Like in that time, I knew my mum was in the best place. Obviously, the top surgeons and the doctors, all these people were looking after her. So my focus was getting my sister through what was quite a difficult time of her life anyway, because it happened the day before she started her GCSEs.
Good.
So that was the focus for probably the first 6 weeks. And then rehab centre after family dramas, and it all kind of took quite an ugly turn, but always had that kind of voice at the back of my head of like, what would my mum do in these situations? And now I'm so glad I learned from the best, because I have quite a resilience when it comes to like drama or difficult life
challenges.
Because it kind of gives me that knowledge of like, or that belief, I guess, to be like, whatever's thrown at me, I'm going to be okay.
Do you find the podcast was kind of a way out for you? Like almost, that's what we've talked about before. As if you don't know, Joe was my first guest, and we look back on that first session and we call it like a therapy session, although it's a podcast episode. It's like we both sat there afterwards and the cameras were off, and this is when we didn't even know like how cameras were working, but the cameras were off. We were both sitting there afterwards and we were just like, ooh, like we were just super quiet, weren't we? Like we almost both needed to get that off our chest. Sure. And that was the first time I'd properly talked to Joe. Like I'd seen him at rugby before, but just like the whole starting of this podcast in particular, and that's why I wanted to ask about yours. Do you still feel the sort of therapeutic effects from it?
Well, it saved me thousands. So
yeah. when you have experts coming on, it basically is like people you pay hundreds of pounds to talk to, and
everyone loves talking about themselves.
Yeah.
So come on, I'm going to take everything I need from this conversation. You'll see like some of the early episodes. This is why I can't put them on YouTube, because I'm literally just sat there writing notes. But no, like you're absolutely spot on. I don't think like people realize just how, everyone nowadays is told like you need to open up, you need to talk. But I think a lot of people in this room are at a point of their life now because they gave into that vulnerability and opened up and shared their story and spoke about it. But yeah, it's the best thing I ever did, was sitting down and just kind of admitting that I needed help and like talking about it. And now I've developed some incredible coping mechanisms. I've learned so much, like how to be a man, how to manage finances, all these things that my parents didn't teach me, my support network around me didn't teach me. And I'm not taking shots, it's just they did what they needed, like with the tools that they had at the time. And it just so happened that I was like, okay, well, if I've learned this much about my mental health just by having these kind of conversations and opening up, well, what else can I talk about and learn? So it's just been that, I'm forever grateful. So I advise everyone, I'd advise everyone to do it.
I agree. We've said this so much.
There's enough competition as it is.
Do you feel like, being from a musical background as well, we didn't, can you say that?
I got it. Where have you got that from?
I thought that's why you started the music side.
I have no musical talent whatsoever.
You're joking.
No.
That's the part we're going to ask them to sing.
I mean,
we were literally going to bring a guitar in and you were going to have to play for us.
I'm not even, I can say this, I'm not even an Ed Sheeran fan. And everyone, the first
but you had him on the pod?
Yeah, that's the first thing that everyone ever asked me is like, oh my God, you had Ed Sheeran. I'm like, yeah. Then afterwards I went to Aldi to do my shot. It's like, it doesn't like, not from an ego point of view, but that's very kind of you. Yeah, but I have no musical talent. It's just, it's always been there from very young age. Like I grew up around music. Like my mum was like a 90s kind of typical mom. My dad used to run like illegal raves, so I've been around music my whole life. And then when shit started to hit in the fan and stuff like that, like I found that the music was the one thing that kind of never left my side.
Also a nod to your mum, I'm sure, as well.
Definitely. And I think everyone has those songs that kind of soundtracks, like the first holiday, the first dance, all these kind of things. And I wanted to find out why people, or when they were creating those songs, what were they going through? And obviously I've been very fortunate to have some of those people on the show to talk about that. But in terms of my own musical
so you're not going to sing?
I'm not going to sing. It depends how much you value this podcast.
Ratings just retention rate gets to 0.
The Austrians are like, now we're good.
What's screaming right now? Please have a shut up.
What was Ed Sheeran like when you spoke to him on the podcast?
So normal. And this is, again, the biggest lesson from that podcast. Like, it does not matter if you've got millions of pounds in the bank, like Olympic medals, like Grammys, you are feeling exactly the same emotions as what I'm feeling. And to have one of the biggest pop stars on the planet talk about what I'm feeling, like, it just completely levels the playing field in terms of, well, he is a lot further on, or deemed a lot more successful than me. Obviously, it's Ed Sheeran, but all the emotions are the same. So it completely strips that all away. And I think that, to be fair, I answered this question like recently, and I think that's what I think does set it aside a little bit when it comes to like the podcast, is because I think I disarm people because I'm not there just to talk about their latest single, their latest album. I want to know what you were going through when you were making that music. Like, why did you start that business? One, because I'm nosy, but two, there's enough podcasts out there that will sit and talk about the same thing over and over and over again.
I agree.
Whereas it's like so important for this, like these kind of conversations, because it breaks all that down. It's like, it doesn't matter where you're from, like there is something that you can relate to. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Great guy.
I think that's all people really want to listen. That's all I want to listen to. I don't want to be sold to. I don't want something incredibly serious. I just want people that I can relate to. People who are authentic. People who just chat, like as we're doing right now. To me, I just think that's so powerful. And I feel like with podcasts as a whole, it's like, don't start podcasts because there's a lot of competition. But it is just like that. And just for example there, is like you won't get to meet Ed Sheeran. You know, if you message Ed Sheeran being like, do you want to go for a coffee? Not going to happen. The fact you're on a podcast, you're like, do you want to talk about this? And he was probably, I don't know, but he was probably afterwards being like, you know, this guy, I was not expecting you to ask me those questions. It's just, that's just such a nice, I don't know, like, to me, it's just a nice thing, even if you don't publish it. I mean, obviously, you've got to publish it.
I've milked that for years now.
But I'm sure he found that like massively rewarding as well.
It was because I only would, when I got given the opportunity to talk to him, I was only given 10 minutes and told I can ask one question.
Does he have a PR team or something that run his stuff?
No, so it was actually through the BBC, like local kind of radio, why I got the opportunity. And I literally got asked the day before if I wanted to jump on a call with him. So it was very, very fast paced.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got told that I can ask one question, and then typical me, I was like, well, if I don't take this opportunity, I'm going to regret it.
Big time.
And I just went for it. And I think he was a bit like, oh. And then when I came in with like the music question of like, you know, when things get tough for you, like what song do you lean on? And then he told this beautiful story of like a friend who meant something a lot to him. And then he pulled out his guitar and then started playing the song.
That's so cool.
I was like, this is why you don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
This is why you've got to trust your gut. Because if I just kind of shut up and put up, that moment never would have happened. So you've just, there's so many lessons from this bloody waffle that you can take and apply to every aspect of your life. But yeah,
very cool story.
You've got to go for it.
That's very cool.
What would you say is the most rewarding lesson you've taken from someone that's been on the Waffle Shop so far? Kind of hard to pinpoint one.
Because there's been a lot.
But it's just so interesting to hear your view on that.
The first one that kind of really popped into my head, her name's Holly Matthews, and she was a guest quite early on, and we've kind of become friends. Like, she lives fairly local to me, and so we've like really stayed in touch. And she gave this advice of, she's from Newcastle, and I'm not gonna, just as my musical ability is not great, nor is my accent, so I'm not going to do that.
You have to.
Absolutely not, because then I will be cancelled. But she said something about shy bands getting out. Basically, translating into like local terms is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And yeah, I think it's kind of stuck with me to be like, well, if you don't ask, you're not going to get. So the worst that they can say is no. And believe me, like, I've had a lot of no's. There's been a lot of people that I've wanted to talk to that they've just been outright no. And that could have stopped me. Could have stopped me in my tracks. But I'm a big believer now in what's meant to be will never pass you by, because some of the opportunities that have come up that I thought these are like dream scenarios. One stage I was moving to New York with a podcast studio just off Wall Street. I thought, this is it. This is my golden ticket. Wasn't.
Happen.
2 days later, I'm waffling with like Scarlett Moffat with the Samaritans. So it's like...
She off Gogglebox?
Yes. Yeah. So like you can view these things as like things that are going to stop you in your tracks, or you view them as obstacles. No, you don't view them as obstacles. You view them as stepping stones.
Yeah.
So... yeah, I could sit here and reel these off like all day in terms of like the lessons. And
have you always had that element of resilience, would you say that's come down to your past experiences?
I think definitely past experiences.
Okay.
I'm my own worst enemy. So when it comes to like certain opportunities, or even now like networking events and stuff like that, from a business point of view, I will go into that room and just stand there in silence.
Sounds like me.
And it's like, this is so silly, because if you put me in front of one of the biggest pop stars on the planet, you won't be able to shut me up.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. But yeah, I think past experiences and the gut, trust in the gut always. And yeah, it will always work out the way it's supposed to. It may not seem like it at the time, but it will happen.
That's cool.
If it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Carrying on the business side, how's it been being a production company owner? Has it been all good? Killing it, by the way.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm still in this phase of there's one element of it, like I don't quite understand how it's managed to do what it's done. But then on the other hand, I'm like,
there's obviously a reason for it.
There's a reason for it.
Yeah.
And you guys know this more than anyone at this point, like the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, securing guests, the lighting, cameras, like
it's
the research, like every angle of this like takes up time. And so to go from doing it for one podcast to now, I think we've got a roster of 12, I think we've got in that we work with in some capacity. Like I don't have time to sleep some days, but I love it. And I think at this point, yeah, if I was to kind of throw it all in, I think I'd be stupid, because quite clearly this was all supposed to happen in the way that it's happened for me to gain my voice and have that confidence and believe in what I'm saying. So to now be in a position where I can help others tell their stories or develop their ideas and give them that reassurance that probably like 4 years ago I wish I had. Yeah, it's the best job in the world. It's surreal that I get to do it as a job.
Do you find that although you started doing this because of mental health and you sort of fell into it, are there times where you wake up and think like, this is too much for me, it's too stressful, and it's taking its toll? Because there's a duality between why you started it and actually the stress and anxiety that actually caused you in the first place. And there's a constant like,
it's toxic. It's really toxic.
Yeah.
And I've seen something the other day on social media, and it's one of those things, you know, when like you're scrolling through and you see like a quote or something and you're just like, why did I see that today? And it was like, there is nothing more painful than doing this much work on yourself and noticing or knowing about like anxiety or certain trigger points. And then experiencing it again and kind of not knowing when this is going to end, kind of thing. It's like, it's so frustrating. But especially recently, it's kind of pushed me to a point where I did question it of like, do I want to keep doing this? Because yeah, I did that typical thing of I should know by now not to bottle things up, not to ask for help. And I just cracked on. And then it just got to a point where I experienced my first nosebleed. I was recently put back on anxiety medication because I worked myself up that much. When I took a step back and started journaling again and just kind of really like got down to like the crux of everything of what's going on. Yeah. All the tools that I knew were in my toolkit, I just ignored to use them. But yeah, there are days when I'm just like, I don't know about this. But then, like I was saying about the podcast, that's something that will remind me to be like, this is why you carry on. So yeah, it's still a massive work in progress.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Hi guys, Joe here. I hope you enjoyed part 1. Don't forget quickly to like and subscribe our stuff. Really helps the page massively. Here's what you can expect to find in part 2. Enjoy.
It's a weird one with me because like the scales are never quite level. It's like I either get myself into a good like physical like I guess routine, then I'd notice like my mental health kind of like dips a little bit.
That's interesting.